Hello, welcome to another episode of Low-Code Campfire. This is episode 192 for April 25, 2025. This is an open lines Friday, so we'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. I am Dale Warner, Head of Support for Plantain, joined capably by Patrick Anderson, Technical Success Manager for Plantain. We do this event this hour, 10 a.m. Central Time, Fridays every week, and it's an opportunity to get together and talk about whatever issues you're facing in low code and Plantain. We record all of them, put them on YouTube, so you can find them at youtube.com/Plantain, at which the QR code there on the screen will get you there, but once you're there, you should definitely subscribe and hit the alarm bell so that you know as soon as we post these, which is usually later the same day. For Low-Code Campfire, we do this informal meeting format where we introduce ourselves if we're new to the group. Otherwise, we say hello and then go around the campfire. We always do first call anything that got submitted in advance. You can submit things in advance by either using this QR code or sending an email to support@plantainapp.com. But we'll go around the campfire. We'll check on some of the other sites like our contributions, our community, and after an hour or so, we will go into Afterglow segment. That's where we turn off the recording, raise a virtual adult beverage, and start to thinking about what our plans are for the weekend. So do engage with us, jump in, show and tell, use the chat window, whatever you want. And with that, I will say hello all. Welcome, welcome.
Good morning.
Hello.
Good morning, everyone.
Good
morning.
Did anybody come with something that they really want to talk about?
I did.
Good. Let's go.
I gave everybody their 5-second gratuitous silence. So you had a chance.
That's right.
Good news. Not a problem. No issues.
All right.
Just more of a how to do it better question. And it revolves around the action that is called create and update tokens, which has superseded one of the old one. I mean, it might have superseded execute tokens or whatnot. So as I travel through my code, Dale and Patrick, and replacing the obsolete tokens with better tokens, been painless and everything has worked fine. Here comes my question. We have a session variable that we need to set, and using the set session token. And I would like to know how to properly use the create update tokens to set the session tokens. And in particular, it's not exactly relevant, but my scenario is I do a SQL query ahead of the create tokens where I'm returning one record only. And there's a couple of columns in that record that I want to store into session variables. And so I follow the SQL query. After I store my record into a token, I then call the create update tokens to where I proceed to have a token name and a token value. And I would just like to know what is the best protocol or the best procedure to set the session variable of this now retrieved variable. Good news is I have it working. I'll be glad to tell you how I did it, but it does seem clunky. So where do we begin? Take a look at the
Excellent. Let's look at the action itself. So that is found under context. Create update token. You had I'll get it on the record. There were two other ways to do the same thing. So create update token was the survivor. There were actually three ways. Inject data was there, and then execute token, which I don't know if
yes.
Execute token is obsolete as well. So they all do exactly the same thing. If you're we've marked them as obsolete because we have this one is kind of the superset, the one create update token, and create update token. There it is, uh, because it has this recursions. It also has this tokenized token names feature. This is the best one to use, and it uh, will work. Um, if you use the other two, and we understand that there are applications that have hundreds of these in there, and before we actually remove them from the product, it is our intention to automatically transfer those into create update tokens. So if you want to, if you're going through the effort of removing them and you want to do that, that's fine. If you don't, um, it's going to happen for you at some point in the future. Okay,
That's what
so
I'm trying
that's
to avoid. Is
pardon.
the removing of the execute tokens and the inject is kind of what I'm doing, and so we don't arrive at 1.28 or 1.30 or 1.50 and someday and then they're just gone. I'm
Right.
trying to
And
stay clean as we go.
and because this is so fundamental to the product, we know that there's just no way that you're going to find them all and it'll make it crazy. So I 99.99% chance that you can not do that effort if you'd like to, and
Okay.
we'll get you there. So now on to your question.
Yes.
Um,
So
how I
in the
have
chat, I'm sorry, Dale, in the chat, I just gave you an example of what my set session token would look like. And from
Yep.
there, I would like to know how you would
So
properly set up those column pairs there.
So the way the token engine works is whatever your when you do when a token gets evaluated, it at when the action engine encounters the token and evaluates it, it's going to return a value. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure set session doesn't return a value. It's an empty value. So you can really use it anywhere that a token would get evaluated.
Of
I
course.
tend to do
And that's
this
what I'm
structure.
accustomed to.
I tend to do this structure where I, uh, in order to get it to evaluate, you've got to put it over in token value, or um, I mean, really anything that can get evaluated. But I typically use the create update tokens. It's not necessary. You could do it on the form. You could do it on anything that gets evaluated. But
That's right.
I would do it here, and I tend to create a token name, something that I know I'm not using in my code, like dummy or no op or something like that. But I'd love to hear if there's other things. And I see Matt has his hand up, so whether you want to add to the discussion or take it another way, jump in.
Um, well, a little bit, Jerry, the syntax that you're using, I use session variables quite a bit, and that's r right on in terms of what I use as well. My question, all right, backing up, I also have standard tokens that I use like over and over again. So I just have them in one create update and I stick it in a lot of my form pre-inits. So I just, export, import into a new form, and then I know I've got all my values there. Like the reason for the raised hand though was that while you're at this, Dale, if you can give us an example of tokenized token names, I tried to do that and didn't have any joy. So if you're
Okay.
feeling up to it,
What I'd love
thanks.
to, because it's one of the few things that I've gotten into the product. It's a very handy thing, so I'd love to do it. Um, but let's do that. Tackle that next. Does anybody have a better solution for how they structure getting set session and set cookie and things like that into the code?
Okay. So with that, it would look like to me that the token DMY, the token name that your little
Hmm.
temp or whatever you want to call it, scratch token, that's really never going to be used. It's just a place you had to put something in there, and you're not really referencing that token. Um, the set session doesn't return anything. It just does its job. And then the session colon whatever would be what returns that value. So with that said, I don't think you can leave if you left the token name blank, I don't think that would work.
I
Uh,
think it would not work. Correct.
and
That's
so it looks like to me you're just creating like a scratch, a placeholder, if you will, for nothing more than that. Um,
yes, but it does actually create a token in the context. It would be blank in my case because set session
yes,
doesn't return
that,
anything.
yes, and that's what I was struggling with. So if you would uh, paste my code that I sent you into the token name just for reference, replacing the DMY with that. Yeah, and don't take it out of the token value. Leave it in the token value too. This is where I landed. It works like a charm. It's fine, but it's clunky. And the only reason why I did that was because I could not leave the token name blank, and it really didn't occur to me to just create a scratch token
Hmm.
that will never be seen or used. But as a programmer, you can see how weird that is to me, how that just didn't quite like feel right to me. But it works fine. Everything, my
And
session does get set and it's available and life is going good.
and I suspect that if there are ways to, I mean, we've talked about this before, ways to see what is in your context. And I suspect that when you do this, if you did it in this format, that something is being created in your context, a variable name that's blank. I don't quite know.
Okay.
So long as this box isn't checked, it's not being evaluated. It doesn't do anything, but it kind of looks like it's doing something. So
Yeah, it does.
I would prefer this format.
Okay. All right. That's what I'll do. And I can understand that and see that. Um, I
So
I am guilty of setting sessions in other places. Like I can actually set the session directly in the return of the SQL command.
mhm.
I can even build it directly into the SQL code and I can make it work. But I just trying to kind of follow the client to app protocol here and stay and not do anything weird. And so this has been a great help.
So again, any token that gets evaluated, if it's a set session token, when it gets evaluated, it's going to do the thing. So you're absolutely
Yes.
right. It could be done in SQL. It could be done in many places, anywhere, anything that accepts a token. But
Hmm.
I like to be explicit with it in that, in my mind, you're assigning a value to something. And so doing that in a place where you normally assign values makes sense. It follows a good logical pattern for me, but it's not required. The other places that you did it are perfectly valid. But you think about maintainability, right? How do you? I mean, it's really nice to be able to give a description and say that you're doing something here rather than just
Right.
it kind of being embedded in your code.
Dale,
Uh,
if we had uh, multiple tokens, for an example, add another token, for an example. Just click your add button right there. And on this one, could we call this one DMY just the same? If you're never going to use it, it's just a scratch. Uh, could
Mm.
you use that? And then over in your token value, you would have code very similar to what I've already put in there, but it might be a different column coming from the database.
exactly. But I mean, so the answer is yes, you do that. These are getting executed in order, so you can actually use one to the next. Um,
Yes.
but I'll also point out, and let's do one here, so we can. Um, let's do column two, whatever that is, and that's going to get
Actually,
something
leave
like that.
the set session. Uh, Let me see what you got. Yes, of course. Yeah. And then you can just change username. That's fine. That works perfect. Sure.
So this, uh, in this scenario,
Yes.
do this one and this one. We'll talk about it in a second, and this one, and it would all it would happen in order, and you would end up with
Yep.
two session variables created.
Yes. And
So,
DMY is just hanging out there doing nothing for me,
and
at least.
DMY would end up getting the last value, which is this, which is still blank. So it's hanging out there. It doesn't ever,
Oh,
it
Yes.
sticks.
Okay. That would keep me from creating multiple tokens and multiple blank empty tokens, which I presume is a resource or some sort of a memory location of something that
It is
might want to keep into consideration. Okay.
a minor one, right?
Yeah.
But especially you're creating empty tokens, it takes very little resource to keep up with that. But I want to point out this syntax is also valid
Oh
because
yeah, of course.
so you can do it just in one step and do as many as you want here.
I like that a lot better. Even better.
And then just pointing out this
Okay.
variation, if I create one that I really want to use, I'm really using my HTML, this is also valid because it's going to create,
Mhm.
it'll get loaded with this, and then a set session always returns an empty, so it gets evaluated, it does the work, but it doesn't, um, it ends up appending a null to the end of I am here, and so it still works. So all
Yeah.
valid.
Okay. I understand that perfectly. I'm not sure why anybody would do that. Uh,
No,
I would have done
I'm
just
not
session at that point.
holding that out as best practice. I'm just saying
Yeah.
it's there.
Okay.
All right, so we haven't heard from Ben today, and he has his hand up so politely.
Haven't heard from me. It makes me sound like I'm a big talker. Um,
No,
I just
you're a big shot in this group. That's
I just wanted to make one little caveat statement because I've seen and heard um where situations like this, like something like set session, um, how do I put this, where the scoping of it, of many things, can kind of bite people in their design. So all I wanted to say for anyone listening to this after the fact or whatnot is that while everything that you posted and shown absolutely correct, but be careful where you use things like set session. For example, that set session is something that will not function in, for example, automation. So if you create an automation that, let's say, is triggered by the insert of a record, and you're thinking to yourself, oh, I want to set a session for the person that inserted that record, and I'm going to insert a session variable, that will not function because at that moment, that automation is triggering in a different scope, not within that user's session. And I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that might, in some cases, also hold true with workflows. So when you use these, specifically things like set session or cookie or anything like that, you have to always keep in mind the scope of when you're executing them and if at the time you're executing it is the correct moment to be placing those values where you think they should be going or where you think they would be going.
so very good point. Let's peel that a little bit. Um, when automations run, they are always in their own context. I mean, the that's kind of the idea that you want things to be running that are not in the middle of what a user is doing. It might be related to what a user is doing in that it's triggered by what they did, but it's completely separate context, and it will not. You're absolutely right. It will not impact um, their session. Um, and now it's time for Patrick to keep me honest. I have an honesty problem. Um, but I'm pretty sure that workflows, if you enter a workflow from a user context, you can set session and it'll traverse back with you. We should test that.
Yeah, I'm not absolutely certain about that either. Um,
I'm going to go
yeah,
95%, and we'll check it here. Maybe that'd be a good playground. We can do that.
I would expect
Um,
that if you, like you said, if you're executing the workflow from a user's perspective, like a user session interactively through a form, I would hazard to guess that in that respect it would work. But again, if that workflow is then also triggered elsewhere that is not context specific for
Like
an
an
individual
automation. Yep.
user, right, then you're going to have that same problem where it's not going to function. So that's what I'm saying. Be very careful when you do things like this, because you could create a workflow and put something in there like this saying, oh, I want to put, the session variable, this value in there during your workflow, but your workflow is called not only from, let's say, a button click, but it's also called from something else. Well, the something else is not going to work. And then you may sit there wondering, well, how come when I click the button it works, but when I run it from
Mm-hmm.
this location it doesn't? Because it's in a different scope, and one of them is being triggered within the user session, another one is being triggered by the system session.
Makes sense. While you're doing this, Dale, just another comment, Jerry, for you, perhaps. You had that user ID, I think you were creating. I do the set sessions, and then you give it a valid token name, like sponsor ID. And then if you're in a form, that token then becomes available as the sponsor ID, as opposed to either retrieving the session value or the whole long string itself. So yeah, Dale created dummy tokens, but you can also create valid tokens as well, doing the same thing.
To your point, when we call set session in our particular case, and to Ben's point, we don't abuse set session. We don't, for the very reason he just said, and the dumb things time out and leave you and your users in a bad place. But in our particular case, we load a record and we grab the ID of that record and maybe a couple other little pertinent things, just so we don't have to keep going back and getting it. Just the enrollment process, and it only needs to exist for a few minutes, much less any longer. But yeah, to your point, we just trying to grab these set them, and then we're going to be done with them just a few minutes later, and they get cleared. So to both your points, I don't like session variables, except they are horribly needed in passing data from one page to another, uh, privately, and equally important, just easier to than putting on the query string or trying to just keep up with what it is. So uh, and I didn't want to use cookies in this particular case because I don't want it on their particular machine. So, Dale, we could probably do an entire show on just that session if we want in cookies. And I know we have in the past, but again, the information that I'm garnering right now on how to properly set it up in the create and update tokens, I am fantastic. You have answered all my questions. To Ben's point, never really occurred to me in the automations to use session variables. For it just doesn't seem like that's the right thing to do. It doesn't make sense to me to do that because of how what the purpose is of an automation. But thank you for that input, because that has segued us into where we're going now with workflows. And heck yeah, they could definitely be in a workflow. And if it's out of the scope, you could be calling next week with a ghost story. So I'm going to hush now and just let Dale show us what he's got.
Well,
And
Jerry,
thank you.
like the reason I mentioned the automation is because until recently, automations in the past, we were able to directly call them. So some people with that old mentality from the previous versions of Plantain App, where we had that ability to call an automation directly, they may think that because they're calling the automation directly, even if it's within the interaction of a form, it is still out of scope, because automations will never in and of itself run within the scope of a user. It will always run
Absolutely.
within the scope of the system. So
100%.
some people may, have that mentality or thought coming from the older way saying, oh, well, if I executed it directly through interaction on a form, it should be within the scope of the user. No. So that's why I'm just saying now we can't do that. So it makes it a little less ambiguous in that respect. but you still can do things like creating a trigger that will happen when you insert a record. And maybe some people might think, oh, well, at the time that I hit the submit button, I'm inserting a record, and that's what's triggering my automation. So, I'm triggering the automate. If that's their thought
Yep.
process, I just want to make it clear that's not correct. There is that
100%.
scoping is one of the biggest things I think that kind of trips people up with using Plantain app, because you have to know with a lot of different things, set session, set cookie, this, that, whatever. Um, there are times that certain things are available and other times where you think it might be available and it's not.
Yeah, 100% good information, Ben. Thank you. And Matthew, thank you for your contribution too. I who knew that such a simple little question would take us down this rabbit hole. And Dale, have we talked enough? Have we killed enough time for you to get your presentation ready?
Somebody help me. What am I doing wrong?
Okay, well, why
Because
don't you try to give my test a direct a value? So I'm not sure if you're getting bollocksed up with quotes. See the session test, yeah. Give it a value. No, nope. The one above set session test equals 1, 2, 3 or something.
well, that's what I was trying to do there, but I like yours. Yours is fine. 1, 2, 3 if I can type.
Hmm.
This all right. I'm gonna make sure I have make sure I have set my syntax correct. So we'll go back to this, and maybe we've discovered it's purely a workflow issue.
Does it require quotes for the
I don't
value?
about to test that. I'm just copying the
Please.
syntax directly out of the. So this is going to be.
In my experience, it does not require quotes, but
So
maybe.
I just know those quotes tend
so
to bite
Yeah.
me quite often.
it looks a great deal like this doesn't work, but let's now export this exact same action without change, and I've got my test form that we're going to work with. And we'll create a text field that is called output, and we'll do a button that we will import the same. So we're going to output is going to get session test, and then we'll do an Ajax so it doesn't clear. So same action. Let's see if we get a good result. If we do, we may say that session doesn't exist in, yeah. So session doesn't exist in workflows, so that's a danger area.
Oh, so even call from a form doesn't work.
Now I'm doing it interactively. Let's play a little bit more. So we'll go. I mean, let's beat it to death, right? So we have we have value, and I'm not going to touch it. So we're outputting. We have output as a value. So I'm going to go back to my form, and we'll add another box called output 2. And we'll go ahead and run the workflow. Execute set session test, and we'll put it above, and the output field I'm going to put to output 2. So that one's just still hard coded to the same thing. So Aha. So interactive, that's great. Interactively, it doesn't run, but through the workflow, you can set session through it. Ah, no, wait, this is using the same one, so who knows? Um, I really need to. I need to isolate this. So first of all, this is the do it button. We'll clone that, and this is do it here, and we won't try this. And the do it copy will be do it in workflow. And we're not going to do it here. We're going to run set session test. This time I'm going to pass. No. I'll pass ABC. Get output 2 back. And yep, it works. So it's very hard to test because it doesn't exist in that. It looks like it doesn't exist at all in that test context, but it does actually influence the user context. So I would put a yellow caution sign on that one. Just catching up with the comments, Ben. Thanks for trying to keep me from going off the rails. That would save 5 minutes. All right, so everyone okay with what we've learned about this and move on to Matt's question?
That was some great information. Thank you.
So let's do another one. This is going to be using tokenized token names and why you might want to do that. So we'll again have a form. So let's add a text. This is going to be an illustration that it works, less of a why would you use this, but this is going to be token name, and we'll copy it and we'll say token value. So we're going to have 2 fields on the form, and then finally I'm going to add another one that is a large text, and I'm going to use my favorite debugging technique, and this one is going to be result context. So when we add a button, we'll just leave it to be submit this time. The create update token is going to, we are using tokenized token names. So instead of putting it into dummy or my HTML or whatever, we're putting it into the result of the evaluation of token name, and token name comes from the form. And we're going to the value that we're going to put here is token value. So whatever comes from token value is going to get stuffed into token name. And then to see this at work, I am going to use context to JSON array, my favorite debugging tool, and that's going to go to be stored in result context. And so everything that's in our context gets dumped out into this field, so we're going to be able to see what's there. And then finally in Ajax, so that the screen doesn't clear, or so that it gets updated, I suppose is a better way to say it. And save. So let's see if this works. So the token name I'm going to create is called my new token. I'm going to say hello world, and I'm going to submit. So all of my tokens are here, and this is the one that we just created. Created a token called my new token, and it has the value of hello world. All the rest of these are, so this is a dump of whatever's in context. So we see token name has the value of my new token. Token value has hello world. The button has a value which is blank. There's validation errors that has a blank, but this is the one we care about. My new token got created, and if I want to create a different token, then different gets created with that. So Matt, so far, does it make sense to you how it works?
Yes, it does. A question for you on this process. Can you, in your token name, you've got the variable token name. Can you, like, suppose you had a bunch of tokens, token 1, token 2, token 3. Can you prepend token name with a constant, like a
Yeah.
word?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, the whole thing gets evaluated, and then so it creates a token name, and then that's where it stores the value, and that's so. For example, we can create a token name called uh, we can build it up with a dash with new compact. This is going to create a totally random token in your context, right? So we run this again, and now we have different whatever. So this is just kind of illustrating the raw, this can be done, but let's say, what do you do with it? If you have something that you're iterating over, uh, whether it's a loop or a set of records or whatever, you can create tokens, one for each. And it really, you can decide what the use case for that is, but essentially it allows token creation to be dynamic rather than saying, I mean, if you create different, that's the only token that you can create. It's going to be a token named different, and it has a value. If you do this, the token name can be dynamic, and so it's a a more flexible I mean, it's something that you as a developer would need to implement it. Um, I'm an old, well, I'm old, but basic programmer, and so I'm very used to having arrays, and I would put, if I wanted a dynamic list, you could create an array of things and provide a a name to the array and then manage it. I don't know. It's this opens up dynamic programming.
So back to kind of tying it into Jerry's previous question about session variables. Actually, no, this was, could you probably couldn't, but use a session variable, like set a variable, and then, I know you probably could use the token value in that session variable as part of your token name. That's kind of one question. And then the other would be if you're iterating through, let's say, a list, and you've done a SQL query, created a list, and then you want to build up tokens, name 1, name 2, name 10, based on the variables as they come through the list. Do you know if that's possible?
Sure. So I'm going to create a list of, I'm going to create user list,
Mm-hmm.
and then we'll do a for each. User list, and in there we can create update token, and the token that we're going to create is user list. Let's see. Actually, let's say that user list has a dollar index, right? So we can use dollar index as a value. So we could create first name user list dollar index. So that'll create first name 0, first name 1, first name on. And so the user list first name is the value we're going to assign to it. So this should get us first name 0, first name 1, and on like that. And so now if we use that and get these below, so we're still creating our context. So we're creating a list from SQL and then user list to X is our comment, and then we're still dumping the context. Let's see if that works. So first I'm going to clear all this up. So we're still doing that part, but we'll get a lot of other stuff too. So user list has a lot of values, and then
Yep.
I don't see first name here. Oh, first name user list colon index didn't give me what I wanted. So
Yeah,
let's see.
I had tried that dollar index and kind of had the same sort of problems.
Okay. Let's make sure I had the syntax right. So create list from SQL has colon dollar index should exist. Ah, tokenized token names. Didn't, and I didn't do that. So let's see if that solves my issues. So now we have first name 0 with a name, first name 1, 2, 3. So they all got created. So we have 41 first names. And this brings up another little thing that's could be useful. Let's do two more things. First of all, let's do in our execute actions, let's do another one. So we have first name, we'll also do last name. And then the other thing that we can do, just again, kind of pointing out debugging techniques, this by default dumps almost everything into the result context. But if we only want to do first and last, it'll limit our outputs to that, and so then we get less stuff in the result context. It only gives the ones that we've selected. So now we only get first name values. So first name and last name are in this output. And maybe easier to visualize. So name 8, they match up. So does that help make sense?
Yes, it does. It does. Thank you very much.
Especially, so I've used this as a debugging technique, but so where we're outputting this array of names and values, but this can actually be a useful thing that, for example, we have all these values that exist right now. If you store this JSON, you could create a list from this JSON and iterate through it and recreate the same context variables by using that that tokenized token names. So it gives you a way that you can we created our context dynamically. We've created the JSON of the context, and then the last piece you could iterate through that JSON and reinstate it. So it opens up the case, for example, of storing. You develop a context that has a lot of stuff. And that's the state of the session today. The guy's going to come back tomorrow, so you could store all of that in an entity. When he comes back tomorrow, you could go grab it and restore it back to the way he was, and he could continue. That's one use case.
Mm-hmm.
Fun times. Anything else while we're down this particular rabbit hole? Cool.
I have a question, but it's something different.
Great. Let's do it.
It was something that I just came across actually this morning. And I don't know if I'm just doing something wrong, if this is something other people have seen, or if this is maybe a change in behavior that's maybe not correct by Planting Up. I'm not sure. But the
Couldn't be that.
token, the token URL colon domain root, from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, depending on how the website is addressed and obtained, so whether it be HTTP or HTTPS, when you use URL domain root, it's supposed to follow that same protocol. So if you're in a secured site, URL domain root should be returning HTTPS / in your domain. And if you're not, then it should just be regular HTTP. Am I correct in that?
I would say so. I would say it should not return back a different if you're in a different security posture.
Okay, because what I'm finding is, and I don't have the old version of Plankton app that I was using prior in a situation that I can go back and check anymore, unfortunately. But now on version 126, what I'm getting people experiencing is that everything on the page is using the secure SSL, and then there's one point where I am in a static text box using an embed to point to a PDF file where I'm using URL domain root as the beginning portion of the source. So I would expect that what it should be returning is HTTPS along with the whole rest of the file location. But in reality, it's not. It's doing it as regular, HTTP. And then that causes a problem because if the person's browser isn't set to accept mixed mode content, insecure content,
Mm-hmm.
then that PDF is not showing. It's just blank. So they have to go into the settings of their browser and tell it allow insecure content, and then it allows it. But I would have expected that that should have been returning the secured URL protocol.
I I would agree. So I think it needs more investigation. I had the site that I just brought up doesn't have an SSL certificate. I did URL domain root, and and, which I know this isn't exactly your test, but just pointing out if you can get into it without SSL, I mean it's returning what you would expect. I'm on an HTTP, so I guess the test we would need would be um, one that you could access both ways. Is it correct that you can access your site as
In
HTTP
both
only?
scenarios, I could do both because, again, my networking, the way they set it up, the clients are going through a firewall and the firewall is enforcing HTTPS. However, I cannot go from the public way because our firewall also blocks certain features that are part of the DNN Core Foundation. So in order for me to do development, I have to log an RDP into the server directly. And when I do that, it's HTTP. So I have to code it to work both ways because if I
Yep.
hard code HTTPS, then it's not going to work for me.
Mm-hmm. Um, yeah, so where were we here? Um, so I would say I would agree with you that the behavior you're describing is what it's supposed to do. If you access the page with secure, then it should come back with a secure link. If you access it without HTTPS, it should come back HTTP. So it bears investigation. It's not the intended behavior. I think that's an open a ticket thing or
Okie dokie.
investigate more yourself. Anyone else before I go on to random topics for 5 minutes? Okay. Stop me, somebody. Just a reminder that the uh, Chrome configuration page loop issue and the issue affecting listing filters on many browsers have all been released hotfixes in 1.26. So if you encounter, it's kind of a slow dribble of people who do that. We sent out who encounter this. We sent out an email announcing the problem and the solution, but everybody's experiencing it on their own time. Beta version, release candidate 1. Anybody have any testing or feedback? Any questions that I can answer? We're still working with it a lot internally, a lot of focus on licensing. We'll see some more. I guess I'll just give a quick update on that. Some of you have already started using 127 in proof of concepts and things like that. And our new licensing model, if you have a professional developer seat, you can create as many non-production environments as you want. And when you create a non-production environment, you still have to go through an activation, but um, so there's an activation dialog. And I'll demonstrate. I was going to demonstrate it today. We'll get into it in another campfire, but it's cool to be able to develop to open up as many as you want. We've solved this technically, but in terms of, yeah, it can be done. Haven't done it really with a thought of how it might be presented and explained, the screens that you have to go through to make it make sense to you as a client. So that's our current phase, that we want to make sure that you understand when you go through this activation dialogue, the questions that are being asked, and maybe even why we're asking are a good enough information so you know how to fill in the blanks. So we're we're working on that. We'll demonstrate it, but it is a cool feature. So if you need, just being aware, if you want to do those non-production environments, like develop proof of concept or have other uses for it, that's even an upgrade context, for example, that the professional upgrade at starting at professional developer seat starting at 127 will help you with that. And in case you're wondering, a non-production environment, what that means is anybody accessing the site is going to see once per day hey, this is a non-production environment. Um, Here's what you're accessing. So wouldn't be suitable for actually using it for production. Your clients would see a screen that they'd have to click through once a day, but that's from us. But other than that, it's activated and free to use, not too terribly annoying, we hope. Okay,
Now I
we're at
got a
last.
question.
Yes, sir.
Um, I think this was mentioned on 185. Uh, Bogdan was showing where if you had, let's say, a starter package, you would be limited to certain features. But if you wanted to add additional features, there would be like you've got the marketplace. I think that's coming.
Yes.
I'm not sure it's all available yet, but you would have the little
Upgrade kind
checkbox or
of.
whatever you call it, where you could select an item that you wanted to add to your cart, and it sends out a request for quote for
Yes.
that feature. So, have y'all documented all that of what features are included with the starter package versus the
Right.
so that we have a good feel for how to discuss this with the client?
Yes. So the there is a let's see if it's up on the site. I believe that I we've uh, started a page, and so I don't think it's published. So one of the answers is there's a page coming that shows generally what's included and not. I think Bogdan might have even shown that page, so that's just partly a reminder that we need to get that public. But then for anybody who has a professional developer seat, and you do, if you were to go through the activation dialog, do a starter plan activation, you would see exactly what you would get, and anything that's not included links over to the marketplace and describes what that thing is that you don't have. So you could experience it. I know that's not as good as just having a one pager that shows what you get, so you can pick. I believe our one pager that we're doing it's going to have like this a 3-column grid: starter, harvest, enterprise. And so there'll be checkboxes, what's included, what's not, and kind of give you an idea of when it's time to move up. So I will put that as a reminder that we need to make sure that's public.
All right, thank you.
Absolutely. I think that's a good place to end. So I will find my end slide and wind it down. Thank you for spending your hour with us, and we'll do it again next week. I will be back to my normal undisclosed location next week, and so hope you'll join us and do that. We'll hang around for a few minutes for Afterglow if you like. We'll turn off the recording here in just a second. Thanks, everyone.